What is up, and welcome to another episode here in, well, snowy Alberta. Today we're going to be talking about something that I've had a lot of people ask me about. How do I get started winter camping? As you guys know, here in Alberta, we can have winter from 6 to 8 months, so I am very familiar with winter camping and winter exploring. So today, I'm going to talk about 5 of the essential items you need for when you're going winter camping. These are what I would consider essential, but many of you might have different essentials that you like to pack on every one of your trips. So if you have something different or you'd like to suggest something different, let me know down below and let me know how you like to winter camp. So a lot of people think you need a lot of fancy stuff like diesel heaters and rooftop tents and stuff like that to start winter camping. When in basic, all you need is a vehicle. You can go car camping any time of the year, and I know plenty of people that have done it. So today, my tips are going to be based off of getting into it and starting with car camping. Probably the first and most obvious one is you're going to want warm clothes and lots of them. So you never really know what the weather's going to be. It could drop to way below what you expect, or you could be stuck out there longer, or you could get something wet and lose its warmth. So you're going to want to make sure you have lots of warm layers. So this includes not only outer shells like snow pants, coats, but also stuff for your hands like gloves, more gloves, and maybe even a raincoat or windbreaker. And then below that, you want your base layers and your mid layers. This ensures that you're able to go take off layers as you need and put them on as it cools down. Especially when the sun goes down, you're going to want to put all those layers on to stay warm. Although while I'm talking about it, it's also important to be sure you're wearing the appropriate amount of clothing. You don't want to get too warm and start sweating because that's going to pull heat away from you. So you want to make sure there's a fine balance between staying too warm and getting too cold. So you're going to be taking layers on and off, and that's why I say you want to bring many layers. The second one is probably another obvious one. Well, you're going to want a warm sleeping bag. This one is rated to -32, but you don't need something that extreme. You want to make sure that your sleeping bag is rated to at least 5 degrees below what you're going out for. And you want to make sure that that's 5 degrees below the comfort rating. Sleeping bags now have a comfort rating and a survival rating. Survival ratings will still keep you alive, but they're not going to be comfortable doing it. Just ask me how I know. And as I said, I am no beginner to winter camping. I have done it for many, many years, not only in this rooftop tent, in this setup, but also backpacking back in the day. So I'm familiar what you can and cannot do. And with that being said, you can get camping in some pretty extreme conditions if you have the right gear. As you guys have seen, if you're not new to the channel, I have camped down to -32. That was with a diesel heater for a little bit till the battery died. But that was in -32. I had this sleeping bag and I had many layers. I had 5 layers up on my top and 3 layers down below with multiple pairs of gloves. So it is possible to camp in extreme cold and honestly have a lot of fun doing it if you have the right stuff. And talking about the right stuff, you always want to be prepared for longer than you expect to be out there. So you're always going to want to carry extra water. I personally like to bring my water in the winter in smaller jugs. I have multiple of these. I have some insulated ones because some of them are going to freeze and you're going to have to warm them up. I personally like the thermos ones in my tent because they won't freeze as much as these Nalgene bottles will. But as you guys know, in the summer I do have a water bladder that carries a lot of water. That won't work in the winter, so we have to resort to something a little more basic with water bottles. But as I said, you're going to want to bring a lot more than you think you need, just in case something goes wrong. I've heard of stories of people getting stuck out in the snow for 5 or 6 days before they're rescued. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to speed that up. But you want to make sure you have food and water for a couple days at least if you're going for 1 day, right? So that includes water as well as food. This is more on the nutritious side of things. You do want to have something with a lot of calories because in the cold you're going to be burning calories. So you want something with a lot of calories. Like I like to have starches and breads and stuff because they allow me to have a little more energy to keep my body warm when it's trying to fight against the cold. And then with that being said, the next thing is, well, something to start a fire and something to be able to maintain the fire. So I always like to have in my car at all times a hatchet here. It's not going to split large pieces of wood, but if I can get some branches and I can break them down and I can make kindling, I can start a fire. And well, speaking of starting a fire, I like to have a fire starter, and you should really always have a fire starter in your car at all times. You never know what's going to happen, especially out here. But I like to have a fire starter, but I like to have a couple. So I have my trusty lighter here. This will work for like lighting our stove and whatever, but you never know when this is going to fail or it runs out of gas. So I like to also carry a thing of matches. And then for my backup, because fire is going to be one of the most important things if you get trapped out here to keep warm. Well, beside your clothes, is you're going to want to make sure you have a fire going. And well, my backup is literally some flint and steel. So these are the backpacking tools for lighting fires. It has a rod and then it has a piece of metal, and you can go ahead and spark it. With this being said, you're going to again want to know how to use this. And I think with everything here, you're going to want to know how to use it. Maybe not so much for the food and water, but for your clothes, you're going to want to know, as I said, you want to be familiar what you should and shouldn't wear. Same with your sleeping bag. You should be familiar with your tools before you go out to the backcountry and have something go wrong, and then you have to figure it out as you go. So as I said, be familiar with it. Make sure you know how to use your tools before you go ahead and jump right into it. And finally, speaking of stuff going wrong, you're going to want to have something to communicate with people. This depends on where you're going. For me, I have a satellite communicator because I spend a lot of time outside of cell service. But for some people, a cell phone might be perfect. Thankfully, some of the new iPhones do have a satellite messaging service, which is nice if you don't want to get a separate device. Although you want to be careful because this is probably going to be a little more rugged than your cell phone, and it's probably going to last quite a bit longer. I've had 3 days on one battery if I'm not sending messages with this. So keep that in mind when you're picking out your communication device. And speaking of communication devices, you also want to make sure that you're going where it's appropriate for your communication device. If you don't have a new phone that doesn't have the satellite communication and you just have to stay in cell phone service, don't go to where there's no service, because that makes this absolutely obsolete. And if you do run into trouble, which out here in the snow, in the winter, you never know what's going to happen, you are going to not be able to communicate. You might have to hike out to find some service, or you might have to wait for someone to show up. As I said, I heard of someone waiting just recently for 6 days for someone to come by and rescue them. But with a satellite communication device, you could send someone your location. You could say, hey, I need help. This is what's the issue, and go from there. And if you're in a real emergency, there's always the SOS on these where it connects you with search and rescue right away. So as I said, be wary of what your communication device is and plan accordingly. And plan accordingly with all your gear, right? If you have not many layers, maybe don't go out in -30. If your sleeping bag's only rated to a -20 comfort zone, well then probably stay above that. If it's rated to 32, come camping with me in -32. It's all fun and games. But as I said, make sure you're prepared because you never know what's going to happen in the winter. In the summer, it's a little bit nicer, there's more people out, and you have a better chance of, well, survival. But here in the winter is, well, less forgiving, so you want to be sure you're ready for anything that comes your way. And well, that is going to be it for my 5 essential items for getting into winter camping. As I said, this is what I would have, most of these I have in my car all the time, but this is what I like to have at all times. Let me know if this is similar to what you guys prepare for, or if there's something that I am missing, and we can maybe talk about it in a future video. But anyways, I will see you guys in the next wintry adventure.